Tech.
You've heard of the baby steps. Maybe you even followed them, at least for a while. But what happens when you hit retirement age and realize a step or two got skipped? Today, we're going to talk about what that actually costs you and what you can still do about it. Welcome to Retire Financially Fit. I'm Barbara Switek. Let me tell you something that I hear more than almost anything else when someone sits across from me for the first time. It's usually something like, Barbara, I did everything right. I followed the steps. I saved. I stayed out of debt. Well, mostly. And now I'm 5 years from retirement and something still doesn't feel right. And you know what? They're usually correct. And it's not because they failed, but it's because nobody told them the rules change. Dave Ramsey built something extraordinary with the 7 baby steps. And for the accumulation phase of your life, those decades when you're working, building, and saving, they're exactly right. Get the starter emergency fund. Get out of debt. Build the full emergency fund. Invest 15%. Fund the kids' college. Pay off the house. And then build wealth and give. That structure works. It has worked for millions of people, and I respect it. But here is where it breaks down. The baby steps were built for people climbing the mountain. They do not tell you what to do when you reach the top and realize you now have to come down the other side. And coming down the mountain, that's retirement. That's what we call the distribution phase of your life. That's where a completely different set of principles apply and where most people, even the disciplined ones, get into trouble. I want to tell you about a man, and I'll call him Gary. And he was 62 years old, a retired engineer, a very methodical person, and he had followed those steps with more discipline than almost anyone I've ever sat across from. Emergency fund, fully funded. No mortgage. 401k maxed every single year for 30 years. He walked into my office carrying a spreadsheet. 2 columns. Assets on the left, monthly expenses on the right. He had done the math. He had done it carefully, and he thought he was fine. What he hadn't done was run the math at 62, not at 45 when he started the spreadsheet, not at 55 when he updated it, but at 62 with the actual numbers. Inflation factored in at real current rates. Healthcare costs in the gap years before Medicare kicks in. Social Security timing, because when you claim matters enormously. And we'll get into that here in the next segment. And taxes. The taxes on those pre-tax accounts he'd been faithfully building for 3 decades. His spreadsheet said he had enough. His plan said he didn't. Because the baby steps tell you to save 15%. They do not tell you which accounts to save it in. They don't tell you that if every dollar you've saved is sitting in a traditional 401k, then every dollar that you pull out in retirement gets taxed as ordinary income. They don't explain that if your required minimum distributions push your income past a certain threshold, that your Medicare premiums go up as well. They don't map out what happens when the market has a bad year right at the beginning of your retirement and you're forced to sell assets at a low just to pay your bills. Gary hadn't missed a step. He just didn't know where new steps waiting for him on the other side of the summit. So today, that's exactly what we're doing. We're walking through the baby steps, the way that they apply to the person who's 5 years out or maybe already in retirement. Not as a checklist that you finish once and frame it on the wall, but as a living, breathing framework that you'll keep adjusting all the way up to the day you retire and every year after that. So step 1 in the Ramsey world is the starter emergency fund, $1,000. And that made sense when you were 28, drowning in debt and just trying to stop the bleeding long enough to really build momentum. In retirement, $1,000 is a car repair. It's 2 months of prescriptions for some people. In retirement, your emergency fund needs to be a full year of living expenses. sitting in cash, not invested, not in the markets waiting to be liquid. Accessible cash. Here's what happens without it. The market drops 30% in a bad year, and it will have a bad year again. I can promise you that. And you don't have cash reserves. So you do what you have to do. You sell. You sell at the bottom of the market to cover the water bill and the property tax and the groceries. And every dollar you sell at the bottom is a dollar that isn't there when the market recovers. Susie Orman, she has been making a point for years, 8 months minimum, 12 months if you can build it. That is the retirement emergency fund, not $1,000. Now, before I go any further, I want to pause here for just a moment. If you're listening and any of this is landing well with you, if you've been doing the steps and you still feel like something's not quite adding up, I want you to go to retirefinanciallyfit.com. There's a complimentary copy of my book, Retire Financially Fit, waiting for you, along with other resources. And these are all my gift to you. No strings, no obligation. Just go to retirefinanciallyfit.com. I'll say it again, retirefinanciallyfit.com. Okay, step 2, get out of debt. Still, absolutely true. But let me be more precise about what that means for someone standing 5 years from retirement. Entering retirement with a mortgage is not automatically a crisis. And I know Dave would tell you otherwise, and I understand his reasoning completely. But I have sat with couples who make a deliberate, eye-opened decision to carry a small fixed rate mortgage into retirement because it preserved their capital that they needed invested and producing income. That can work with the right structure, the right rate, and the right total picture. What cannot work is consumer debt, credit cards, car loans, store accounts, personal loans, any variable rate obligation. That has to be gone before you retire, because on a fixed income, an interest rate that adjusts is not an inconvenience. It's a crisis in slow motion. Steps 3 through 6, invest 15%, fund the kids' college, pay off the house, build wealth. All of those compress and transform as you approach the finish line. The question shifts. You stop asking, how do I grow this? You start asking, how do I not lose it? And more importantly, how do I make it last 25 or 30 years on a budget that doesn't adjust the way that your salary once did? And so that brings us to step 7, build wealth and give. That's beautiful. And in the Ramsey framework, that's where the journey ends. But for the person sitting across from me at 62 with a spreadsheet and a nagging feeling, step 7 becomes something much more specific. It becomes build a retirement income structure that does not depend on a good market to survive a bad year. Because the years you can't afford a bad year are exactly the early years of retirement, when that sequence of your return matters most and your ability to recover is at its lowest. Retirement is a pressure test, not a math problem. The baby steps prepare you for the test, but they don't take it for you. Now, Gary came back 3 weeks after our first meeting, and he didn't bring the spreadsheet that time. He said, I think I've been solving the wrong problem. And that's exactly right. For 30 years, Gary had been solving the accumulation problem. How do I build enough? The retirement problem, it's different. It's how do I turn what I've built into income that lasts as long as I do, and in a structure that doesn't collapse the first time the market moves against me. The baby steps were never supposed to answer that question. They weren't designed to. They were designed to get you to the point where someone like me can sit down with you and build the second half. So tonight, we're building the second half. We're going to cover debt going into retirement the right way. Social Security timing, which is one of the most consequential decisions that you're going to make and one of the most misunderstood. And then the mailbag, where your questions drive the conversation. Because Hope is not a retirement strategy. And a checklist you finished at 45 is not a retirement plan. What you need right now is a structure, one that's built specifically for where you are right now, not where you were when you started the steps. And Gary figured that out. And so can you. What I find most often, and Gary's a perfect example of this, is that people in their late 50s and early 60s have been so focused on the accumulation number that they never stop to build the distribution picture. They know how much they have. They don't know how much they can safely spend. They don't know in what order to spend it. And they don't know what the tax bill looks like when the money starts coming out. Those are not small gaps. Those are the gaps that determine whether a retirement holds or quietly falls apart somewhere in year 10 or 12. The people who get this right, the ones who come in 5 years out, build the real picture, make the adjustments before they retire, they almost never panic. They don't call me when the market drops. They don't lose sleep when they read the headlines because their income is structured to survive the bad years without requiring the good ones. And that's the difference. And it starts with understanding that the baby steps were the foundation, not the whole house. And one more thing before we take the break. If you have a question that you'd like me to answer on the show, something specific to your situation, something that you've been wondering about but you haven't been able to get a straight answer on, send it to barb@retirefinanciallyfit.com. That's barb@retirefinanciallyfit.com. And if I use your question on the air, I'm going to send you a special gift as a thank you. So please don't be shy. Send it in. And if what we've been talking about today really makes you think, it thinks about helping you, whether your plan is really built for the second half of your financial life, then I want you to call me. Not next month, this week, today. The number is 800-883-1518, and we're going to set up a discovery call. There's no pressure. There's no sales pitch, no obligation. It's really just a conversation about where you are and where you actually need to get to for your retirement. And so, again, 800-883-1518.